4040 Vision podcast. I am your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I am joined today by the Zodiac GM. Maybe you've seen him on Twitter talking about star signs and astrology and how different NBA players fit on different teams. But he's here today, anonymous, for professional reasons, but he has graciously agreed to join our podcast and talk about everything related to the work that he's doing. So how you doing today, my friend?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So today's topic is all things astrology, all things zodiac when it comes to the NBA. We're going to be talking about your methodology for how you are grading transactions and fits on different teams. We're going to be talking about famous duos and trios in the NBA that worked out, and of course some that didn't, from of course the astrology star sign angle. But before we jump into that, could you give some of the folks that are maybe not quite as familiar with the concept of horoscope and astrology just a brief explanation on how this all works?
So astrology and zodiac is basically a series of traits for each personality type. So the way I see it is that's sort of how the world revolves around, amongst each other. Each individual has what I like to call a sort of like a zodiac DNA, right? So not every person is the same. So a lot of it stems from the date of birth when they were born. And, as many of you know, astrology and zodiac signs has been here for many, many, many years, right? Dating back from way back then. So it's evolved over time, and a lot of it has, a lot of people use it in relationships, compatibilities and that sort. But as of late, maybe the past 1 or 2 years, I've sort of introduced the idea of sports and astrology. So, and how team fits and energies, how they match or do not match. And that's sort of where everything has come about.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I mean, if we're talking about relationship and compatibility, if you're a Cancer, how you fit with, I believe my wife is a Libra. You could tell me she was born in late December. I think she's a Capricorn.
Late December, Capricorn, yeah.
Capricorn, okay.
I
knew I had that right, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, my sisters are Libras. They're early September. So when did you get into astrology? Was it did you just decide one day, I'm going to get into this and apply it to sports, or did these two interests happen kind of organically?
Yeah, pretty much organically. Ever since I was in elementary school, I would read the daily horoscope, look up my sign, and I started looking at traits and everything about my sign, right? And then I got curious of, who do I match with? Who am I compatible with? And I started connecting two and two here and there. But eventually it evolved into kind of understanding more about it. I do have an autistic brother who's 2 years younger than me, who's nonverbal. So, me and him would always have these little conflicts and, when we were younger. So I've always tried to understood him. I took a step back and kind of gave another perspective. Hey, what if I understand his sign? Is that something that maybe that can help me understand him better? So I started doing that, and I started reading up on his sign. I started realizing there's a lot of similarities to the energies compared to what I've read.
Yeah.
And from that standpoint, it kind of grew into an even more curiosity into everything. I started just analyzing just the people around me in a subtle way, and also the relationships I've been with and why it did work or why it didn't work. And there was just a lot of trial errors or whatever it is. And that's sort of how I gained my experience, quote unquote, and 30 years of knowledge and understanding and reading and even sort of that experiencing what's surrounding me. Even when I played sports, I started connecting pieces here and there, and I started analyzing other teams that we played against, for example, and I started just kind of realizing, hey, what if, just the what if, and then in sports and NBA in particular, it grew upon me around the 2017-18 season. I'm a Houston Rockets fan, where Chris Paul came into the picture, and a lot of people were saying, hey, it's not going to fit because he's going to be a ball dominant player with James Harden. But then I looked at their sign. Okay, Chris Paul's a Taurus, James Harden's a Virgo. You know what? I think it's going to work. But it was just a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, when I did my research and I looked up their whole roster, their whole team was compatible in a sense where I started kind of creating this theories, right? And, over the years, I've sort of refined some of those theories and made it a little bit to a point where you know, everything started connecting. So that's sort of when it started, 2017, 18 season, when I started creating my own database for astrology.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Warriors fan, and I can tell you that that 17-18 series against the Rockets, I think they were up 3-1. I'm glad it didn't work out. It did work
Mm-hmm.
out, actually. I should
Mm-hmm.
say there are folks that say they probably would have beat the Warriors and likely beaten the Cavs had they stayed healthy. But Chris Paul's hamstring and all that kind of torpedoed thing. So it did
Oh
work
yeah.
out, but I'm kind of glad it didn't. Fortunately for you.
Yeah.
Uh, but you mentioned playing sports. So before we jump into your methodology and all that stuff, what sports did you play growing up, and when did you become a huge sports fan?
I've always been a huge sports fan ever since I started watching basketball. I was, a Rockets fan. Olajuwon days when they won the championship in 90, 93, 94, 95 years, and that's kind of where, I started loving the sport of basketball. And then I started playing, little league to high school, middle school, high school, even street ball, pickup ball. And from there, I've always knew the idea of what my sign was and all the players around me. I always had a knack of knowing the energies around me just because of my curiosity. And I've always sort of said, okay, if this sign is this, how can I relate to this sign? It was more about understanding the energy, right? Um, and it's always been inside of me. I never really talked much about it. It was just sort of one of those self things that I was just curious about and see how I would relate in a real life situation.
Hmm. And as far as you've already talked about your inspiration for joining these ideas, and it seems so straightforward, right? I mean,
Hmm.
relationships in personal relationships, working relationships, these all could be affected by folk signs. So why not extend it to sports, where that is basically another kind of working relationship, obviously with a lot more pressure than your average day job. But as far as your methodology goes, like, do you have a spreadsheet with all the players and their star signs, and are you kind of, you have a big whiteboard in your house where you're drawing all these lines together? I'd like to hear more about your process.
It's interesting because one of my best friends, who I'm very, very compatible with, loves sports. Around that 2017 year, from to even till now, that we had many, many discussions about astrology, and actually that's sort of what helped me develop all these ideas and theories, because the help of him. And that's sort of another aspect to it. It kind of brings the best out of you when you have energies around you that you feel comfortable with, and they absorb your ideas and energy so well that they can go ahead and translate it in a way that both of you understand, and that goes in coaching, that goes in especially coach player situations, or even duo situations, tier one players in the team, everything in that mold, right? So yeah, it started a database, a simple spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, put a single team sign. I did months and months of research and understanding, gathering detail information such as their sun and moon. I couldn't really get their rising because you need their exact birth time, but the rising is more like the superficial, the out layer of your appearance. So I didn't really consider that, but it's more like the sun moon quality, like the fixed mutable cardinal energies, and I pretty much laid it out into a spreadsheet. And I did, believe it or not, I did have a whiteboard where I did my, some, I guess, game planning, where I said, okay, what if this player was this player? Or we played some games and just put signs up there and kind of guess what team that the group of signs belong with, or if they're
Hmm.
even good or not. So that's sort of how we kind of came upon of like, okay, this actually works. If we can figure out, if you can give me 5 signs, and without telling the player's name, tell me if they're good, mediocre, or bad, or whatever the case is. And we started
Okay.
we started doing it that way, sort of like a reverse. And we found a lot of interesting scenarios where, like, wow, you can't make it up, sort of like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to test your hypothesis, is like kind of a blind
Hmm.
test, right? I mean, if you pull up the 2017 Warriors or whatever, some other dominant team, you're like, yeah, of course their signs fit together. They're a great team. And then maybe the Pistons that won 10 games a few years ago, you're like, no, they're a terrible team. They don't fit well together. But I like doing it the other way, where you said you had the star signs without the names or the teams, so you were able to test that hypothesis that way. So I'm familiar with star signs, and then the Cancer, Libra, that kind of stuff. What are when you say the sun and the moon, what are you referring to? What does that mean?
Sun and moon. So the sun is more like your core personality, right? And your moon is sort of like your reactive type of energy that you bring out. So when you combine them, for example, just because you're a Leo, just because you're a Cancer, they're not all the same. So you have a different
Mm,
variety of all these energies that you're linked with, right? But in sports in particular, I mainly just focus on sun and moon because, of course, there's a whole birth chart, right? But that's more into like a deeper personal type of reading if you want to get into stuff like that. But since we're talking about sports, I was trying to find something that's more broad to an extent where there's a common ground, right? And I don't want to make it too complex because if you start reading the birth charts each and every player, then no one's going to be compatible, right? So I sort of wanted to find out that sort of like that baseline common ground where okay, we can connect pieces, and this is simply for the game of basketball. Since there's five players on the court, they have to share the ball. How is that group going to connect? You know?
and where does the coach fit in? Because I've seen you mention the
Yes.
coaches as well on Twitter. How does the coach
Oh,
fit
yeah.
in with the five players on the court?
It's a big deal because if you think about it, just because it's synergy, I look at the analysis. Not simple. It's not as simple as like, okay, these as long as you have these signs, they're good or not. Of course, you have to consider every aspect: talent, skill, experience, even coaching. The reason why, because coaching is the head. They're the leader. You have to listen to the coach, right? So they're the one that sets sort of like that foundation, that culture, and it stems down from there, right? So you kind of get a feel of the energy of the coach and which players connect with that coach. So there's so many layers to an analysis, especially the synergy analysis, right? So at times you can have a head coach that's not compatible to any of the players, but the team is still
Mm,
good because maybe, for example, the group of players that what I like to call core players, the one that plays majority of the minutes or your star players, they are compatible amongst themselves, right? But there's also scenarios where maybe one or two energies can throw off the synergy of the rest of the team based on their influence, based on their usage, and skill set or experience or whatever the case is. So it's like a whole combination of all of these analysis put into one, and that's sort of how you kind of get that synergy. You know,
yeah, that's
um,
fascinating.
yeah. So you have to know ball. In other words, you have to know basketball already to kind of get a grasp because each and every team is different and unique in their own way. But
Hmm.
implementing the synergy strategy helps and kind of gives you that edge because if you're drafting a player and you're choosing between two players, well, guess what? Pick out which is compatible to your star players. That's a start, right? Or which is compatible to your head coach if you plan to, see something more in the future, long term. So scenarios like that come up and questions like that come up where you can be like, okay, I think he'll be a good fit long term, or I think he could be a good fit with the star player and so forth.
Got it, got it. So you mentioned the Chris Paul James Harden pairing as something that you thought was going to be successful. Any other successes recently with predictions where maybe public opinion was one way and you felt the other way?
Many. The first one I started was, or for example, last year when Dame Lillard got traded to the Bucks, right? Dame Lillard's a star, and everyone's saying, "Hey, this is a great fit," and so forth. But the first tweet I posted about that, I was like, "Hey, this is not a good fit because you're throwing a water energy from Dame Lillard into a team full of fire energies. It's going to throw that team off, in particular by a lot. And the reason why, because Dame Lillard's such a huge influence. He's a star player. It's not like he's going to be playing the limited minutes off the bench or anything like that. He's going to go in there and he's going to get his minutes and he's going to take over a lot of the impact of the team dynamics, right? So I saw that as like, wow, that's a big hit for Milwaukee. And not only that, they hired Adrian Griffin, who is also a Cancer. The coach that had that before that was Coach Bud being a Leo, and Leo is compatible to Giannis, right? So as soon as they got Griffin, I saw it right away. I was like, I don't know. I mean, you have your star player. We just won a championship a couple of seasons ago. Now you have a head coach that conflicts his personality type, and then you have your A1 or AB player. One B player and Dame Lillard coming in. I don't know. So that's kind of where that sort of fell apart. But then as of late, the Vikings were one. I I
Okay.
looked at the key pieces of from their head coach, offensive coordinator, their quarterback, their wide receiver core. all compatible. They were dominant from Geminis to Aquarius, and look where they're at now. I mean, they're like, I believe, what, 13-3 or something. I can't remember, but they're like
Yeah,
up
right
there.
there.
They're up there.
Yeah.
And that was one that many didn't expect because who was their starting quarterback? Sam Darnold, right? But before the season even started, I saw it more in the synergy side because if you pick out the key pieces of a team, especially in football, mainly for offense, because on defense it's a little bit harder, but I set it up more like a baseline. So the standard deviation is a little bit more narrow, right? So you just try to pick out these little advantages of what you can get for team dynamics to have an advantage, right? And that was one of them. Was okay, if the offensive coach has a good synergy with the head coach and have a good synergy with the quarterback, I can just picture them being in a room and game planning and being able to let out whatever ideas or pain points or anything freely, and they can absorb it very well, where they can say, okay, you're thinking this, okay, I have a backup plan for that, instead of disagreeing or anything that kind of conflicts with their energy. It's a little bit more easier to translate a game plan into the field, and that's pretty much what happened. Not only that, Sam Darnold and Jefferson are elite. Their
Yeah.
synergy is Gemini to Gemini is, as good as it gets, on top of that with their head coach and so forth. So that was another one. But Memphis Grizzlies another one. Their whole roster seems like they're all compatible. The Knicks is another one when Towns got
I
traded.
did see that. You were very happy about the Towns move
Yeah.
to
When
New
I
York.
saw when I saw that one, I was like, wow, Towns is, to be honest, I felt like, man, New York has been doing a lot of trades that fits their roster. I remember I posted a tweet maybe 2023, and I pinpointed exactly which players that didn't fit their team in synergy, right? And they're no longer there. I mean, to me, I was like, wow, that's interesting because Randall's no longer there, Barrett's no longer there, DiVincenzo, out of all, is no longer there either. And they started adding pieces that actually fit Jalen Brunson's energy, and Coach Tibbs' energy. So
Yeah. Let's talk about DiVincenzo because he was a big piece for them, and he was one of the Villanova group, and people talked about being upset that he got traded. So what was it about him that made him conflict maybe or not fit with Jalen Brunson and the rest of the team?
Well, when they won the championship, I mean, if you go back and look at that Villanova championship team, yes, he was part of that group, but he was sort of like the outlier energy, right? Because Brunson,
Hmm.
Virgo, Bridges, Virgo, who else am I missing? Hart is a
Yeah, Josh
Pisces,
Hart. Yeah.
and they're all compatible amongst themselves. But the fourth one, being DiVincenzo, being an Aquarius, was sort of like that outlier energy. And this doesn't necessarily mean that they won't get along. It's just that their energies don't speak the same language. That's all it is. And sometimes that could cause like a misunderstanding. Whereas when energies do connect, they understand each other much easier. It's much easier to translate whatever their thoughts and ideas are, or even feelings, much easier than an energy that doesn't read you or absorb whatever you have to say very well. So he was the outlier, and I thought that was interesting that they did trade him because he was one of the energies that pinpoint. Okay, if the Knicks want to go somewhere, they have to make these type of moves in my mind, right? To
Hmm.
kind of break out of that mediocre phase, because I've always felt New York has been that mediocre team that they can't really be that elite, right? But then look where they're at now. I mean, yeah, they lost the last couple of games, but they won 23, 24 games already this season. So
Yeah, that's incredible. I would not have predicted that for sure. I thought, maybe a basketball fit, Towns and all that. I mean, again, you were very happy about the move, so I was like, okay, maybe there's more to it than the basketball side. But I definitely included Vincenzo in that group with the Villanova. I didn't think of him as an outlier. Uh,
yeah.
since you've been, coming out, you have quite a big following on Twitter. I think 20, 30,000 followers. What's been the general public reaction to your predictions? Did it take a little while for people to get won over to your arguments?
Yes. I was actually, believe it or not, I was hesitant to even start this whole idea, right? Because I've always wanted to build a platform, but initially, what I really truly wanted to do was get involved in some sort of NBA. To be honest with you, it was more like a dream, right? I was like, oh, imagine. And so, I looked up and I found, I found a way to reach out or send an email with all my analysis to three GMs. right? I can't say who they are, but three GMs to kind of let them know what my ideas and see if it's something that can be helpful. Of course, I didn't get any response back, but that was anticipated because I was like, okay, who's going to look at this crazy idea of astrology and zodiac signs fitting into sports? I knew that. I was anticipating that. So I was like, okay, you know what? Forget this idea of me trying to be in the front office. Let me just go ahead and try to see if I can quote unquote prove it. And the only reason why I felt comfortable because the years, maybe 3 to 4 years already back testing, and I've done a ton of back testing with different theories and a lot of fails, of course, and a lot of failed ideas, of course. But it got to a point where I felt comfortable enough to put it out there, and that's kind of where I started the Twitter account. And from 2023, I already anticipated a lot of people. There's a backlash to a stigma in a sense to astrology. People talk about,
Hmm.
hey, don't put this into sports. This is about relationships. Hey, this is only for girls or whatever the case is. I've heard it all. But I wanted to be consistent, and you just have to be strong and with what you put out and believe it. And then that's when people started realizing, what if there really is something here? Because some of the stuff
Sure.
I was
Yeah.
putting out, people will go back and say, okay, that's a coincidence. But then the consistency part is what really took over. And I think people started to see that. And yeah, that's pretty much where it came, where I'm at right now. So,
Mhm. I mean, they say if you don't have haters, you're not doing anything of impact. So you obviously have those, especially
mhm.
initially when you started. But as far
Yeah,
as the GMs go, I mean, I get why some of them might dismiss it offhand, but they're so into data and analytics, and they take every piece of, well, at least some of the front offices. I think some of them are still pretty old school, but I would think this would just be another piece of data. I mean,
it
when you're
is.
in college or high school, I think you take like personality tests and you have the, ENFP, whatever those personality things are. And I can't imagine it's that much different than being associated with a certain star sign and having those qualities. So I would just think of it as another piece of data, but maybe it's too far beyond. It's like one
Right.
step too far. They can talk about VORP and war and all these other acronyms, but maybe the talking about Cancer and Libra is a little bit too far. Uh,
Mhm.
but as far as any, like, were there any predictions or transactions that you thought 100% this is going to work out and it just didn't? I know we don't like to talk about our instances of being wrong,
Yeah,
but I'm
no,
curious.
there's a whole bunch of levels to it, and granted, this whole synergy thing is never 100% because there's so much, that's put into it, right? It's like whenever a scout, they analyze talent, they go to games, they analyze talent and everything, and then they bring to front office and they give their spill. So if they can analyze that, how are they going to analyze chemistry? How? Right? But if you can use a synergy analysis to it, you're just adding on to your to everything. You're just getting better. You feel like it's an edge, right? So so that's kind of the way I see it. But back to your question. What was your question at the last part?
Just particular times where you thought a transaction or free
It's
agent or
failed.
draft pick was going to work out, but it didn't.
The Kyrie Irving trade. I'll point that
Which
one
one?
out. Kyrie,
Which guy you trade?
to Dallas. So
Okay.
when that one first came about, I was thinking that it's not going to work out. And the first year that he was there, right? But granted, I think there were some injuries or anything like that. But it's either Kyrie's playing or only Luka was playing. But they hardly played that much in the first season, right? But then the second season they made it all the way to the finals. But then each and every year is different, right? Because I felt like what really helped Luka in the second season that Kyrie was there was the acquisition of PJ Washington, which is an energy that helps him. But before PJ Washington, the record between Kyrie Irving and Doncic playing together was sub 500. Not a lot of people knew that, but I thought it was very interesting because without certain energy that would benefit Luka, which he was, my opinion was a go-to guy, right? And it was a disadvantage for him. But as soon as they got, you know, PJ Washington, that helped benefit him, and then they sort of connected the pieces together. And they got Lively, of course, and Gafford, of course. So they added, height, and they added a little bit more talent too. So that was also an uptick in their overall analysis. So that kind of helped them us also. So that was one that I can say wasn't 100% accurate or anything like that. Another one was Beal, the Beal recently. Uh, well, yeah, I guess it's sort of both because I did analyze that one. It depends what angle you were looking at. So I did look at an angle where the coach wasn't compatible to Beal, right? But also the trio of Beal, Durant, and Booker wasn't compatible, right? But before the season started, they acquired Tyus Jones, right? So I always
Hmm.
look at these supporting energies that surround and sort of complete a team. When they got Tyus Jones and their presumed lineup of Tyus Jones, Booker, Beal, Nurkic, and Durant, that starting five, I had anticipated that was going to be a strong synergy lineup. But as of late, of course, it's faltering, right? So that was another one that I can pinpoint that didn't work out, but only because of the acquisition of Tyus Jones, right? Because I felt like he was a connecting piece. I always like to look at these connecting energies that help certain energies, but unfortunately, it didn't work out as planned. So that was another one. But my initial thought, of course, the trio was a C plus. As soon as Beal got traded, that was the first thing I did mention. But of course, it's present day right now. It's not working out, right? But I do feel like they're still a strong team mainly because of their talent, even though their head coach is not compatible to four of the five starters. So that's also
Okay.
another one.
No, I appreciate your willingness to talk about
Hmm.
being wrong a couple of times. So one thing I really wanted to do, I was really excited to talk to you about was some of the recent duos or trios that have succeeded in the NBA and maybe why this was the case. I think most recently Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. For a long time, people talked about, oh, these guys don't fit. It's not going to work out. The Celtics need to trade one or the other if they ever want to win a championship. And then, of course, last year they go on one of the most dominant runs in NBA history. What is it about them that allowed them to finally break through to an NBA championship?
So whenever I analyze the team, I look at who their best players are, right? So of course, for the Celtics, Tatum and Brown. So Tatum is a Pisces, Brown's a Scorpio. So you have two water elements that are very compatible to each other. The best way to look at it, so I sort of group them by elements: water, earth, air, fire, right? So earth and water tend to have a good synergy amongst each other. They sort of speak the same language. That's a good way to put it. And then air and fire signs tend to do the same. They tend to understand each other elements. But of course, within those two groups, there's different variants of connections, right? So the connection of Tatum being a mutable energy has a strong synergy with Brown being a Scorpio fixed energy. So they help each other out. But believe it or not, I mean, and this was very, very interesting that no one really talks about this player on this team. But the key player to this whole synergy, in my opinion, is actually Derek White.
I was
Derek
going to guess
White
that.
is a big deal for this team. Why? Because quote unquote enables Tatum and Brown to be the best. Because so Derek White is a Cancer energy. So you have three water energies that completely understand each other, right? Especially when you have those qualities that sort of in the same group together, you get the best of everything because you have the cardinal energy, which is more like that leader type emotional energy in the sense of a water element, which what White brings. You have the fixed constant energy that you can depend on, and you have the mutable energy. I'm sorry, the fixed energy in Brown that you can depend on, which is a Scorpio, and then you have the mutable energy of a Pisces. So when you put those three in a room together, they understand each other and they connect much easier, and they'll bring out onto the floor where it's sort of almost instant. Like they don't even have to try. It's like the instant chemistry. They're like, wow, how did you know I was thinking that? You know, when you play pickleball, sometimes you don't know these players, and so all of a sudden you just like to play with them. You know, that's what their experience. And believe it or not, many teams have this type of what I call the trifecta alignment, right? And then Denver has it. I mean, Memphis has it. New York has it. And this is a big deal for connecting all the pieces together. So
Let's talk about another one. Jokic and Murray. So you mentioned Denver Nuggets and their trifecta. What is it about them that allowed them to be successful besides obviously being healthy for the first time in a long time?
yeah, you're right. So, I forgot to mention the coach too. Coach is the biggest. So, coach is a Cancer Missoula, right, for Boston. So,
Okay.
Missoula, of course, very compatible. Yes. So now with Denver, also the same thing, very compatible. So you got the Virgo head coach in Malone, right? And both Jokic and Murray are both Pisces energy, right? But if you look at the surrounding energies around them, remember when they brought in Aaron Gordon, who's also a Virgo? You notice how that team
Mm.
really went up to another level. He brought that, you know. And then they have Porter Jr., who's a Cancer energy. So right away you have your two best players that are very compatible because Pisces connection is very, very strong, and then you have the Cancer energy. It's almost similar to Boston, right? And then you have the Cancer energy is also compatible with that group, and also Aaron Gordon, who's compatible with that group as well. And then you had KCP. KCP was a cusp sign of an Aquarius and a Pisces. So he also helped a lot in forming that team. So the way I look at it, if you have at least four compatible, and out of the five that you put on the floor, it's really good synergy, right? So, and then I break it down in quality. So Denver has had that. So losing KCP this season was a downgrade in synergy, but
Hmm.
Braun is sort of like that outlier. He's a fire energy that's more like direct. A lot of these fire energies, especially in Aries, you can tell how they play, like the TJ McConnell, Alvarado. They're sort of like fast, energetic,
Yeah.
quick. It's interesting. It sort of relates
Yeah.
to their actual energy type, and that's what Braun is. You see him play; he's very direct, forceful, and straight to the point. That's kind of the energy he brings, and he's a cardinal energy. Cardinal leads by, well, whatever element is. So a cardinal energy of Aries, they lead by energy, So that's what Braun brings.
Got it. So as a Warriors fan, I definitely want to talk about the big three. So Steph, Draymond, Clay, which seemed for like a long time the perfect fit until, of course, Clay decided to depart. And I definitely want to talk about the KD element as well. But let's talk about the big three first. So what is it about Steph, Clay, and Draymond that allowed them to succeed for so long?
So the key synergy here is really from Steph and Draymond, in my opinion, right? So Clay
Hmm.
is an outlier. He's an Aquarius, right? But if you take a step back and look at the whole roster, and I remember analyzing, I can't remember, it was 2015, 2017 years where I started noticing that Warriors in particular started picking up a certain energy type. And I thought that was interesting. What I mean by that is they tend to get a lot of air signs, right? Aquarius, that's what Klay Thompson is, Aquarius, right? And they started picking up like the Geminis, like the Jordan Poole back then. And the reason why, because these are energies that are very compatible to Coach Kerr, who's a Libra, who's also an air sign. So I thought that was very, very interesting until I can't remember what year it was, where they did win the championship, and the only two outlier in the whole roster was Wiggins. Make it three. Wiggins, which is a Pisces,
Hmm.
Curry, Pisces, and Draymond, Pisces, all mutable signs. So what I mean by
Yeah. So
mutable
that's
signs are also,
2022. Yeah.
was it two? Okay, but the rest of the roster was all air or fire dominant, which was compatible to Steve Kerr. So that was a unique situation because you have I guess your three best players that are compatible amongst each other. Not only that, they have the capacity to adapt to a scenario. So they're not like fixed or, they're not trying to take over. So they're more like willing to adapt into a situation. And then you had all the right energies as role players that understands Coach Kerr's philosophy and game planning. So I thought that worked out very, very well. Not only that, I think I remember was Durant on that team? No,
Not in
no, Durant
22.
was the
No.
one prior to that. So yeah, then Durant also an air sign. So that was, that's sort of like the trend that I saw in particular with the Warriors, that over the years, what they picked up a lot of air fire dominant signs, all opposite from their three best players, but then they were still really, really good. So that was, I thought that was very interesting for the Warriors.
That is really interesting. And I want to talk about LeBron. So LeBron, I think one of the things he's known for is being a little difficult to play with for some guys. I mean, some guys fit, some guys don't. And he had a great partnership with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. Not so great one with Kyrie, even though they won a championship, but they fell apart. And then most recently with Anthony Davis, they seem to be thriving after the bubble championship. They're not doing so well, but I think personality wise, they seem to fit. So, what is it about LeBron that makes him only compatible with, seems like, with certain signs?
So LeBron is a Capricorn with an Aries moon, right? So he does have a conflicting energy combination, but it's a very strong combination. What I mean by that, he has a Capricorn, cardinal energy, is very authoritative type of leader, and then he has an Aries moon, which is more of an energy type of leader. What does that spell? Being, you get in a player that's all about leadership, but then they're the type that will sort of quote unquote gripe if things are not going their way, because the energy of an Aries, they're the first sign of the zodiac, is sort of like that childlike energy, right? But they're very active and very energy, very aggressive, and they're more results oriented. So anytime you're dealing with the Capricorn, you have to get results. I mean, it's an earth sign, and they're not getting the results. Oh, yeah, it's gonna go downhill from there. Think of Tom Thibodeau, who's also a double Capricorn, matter of fact, and you kind of get a sense of his style, right? They're the energy that's like, hey, you're gonna go in there, you're gonna work as hard as you can, no matter what. There's no positivity here. All it is, if we get the championship, that's all. That's all that matters. That's sort of like their energy. So with him and Dwayne Wade, who's also a Capricorn, they're sort of similar, right? So when they formed that big three in Miami, they had another cardinal energy in Bosch, who's an Aries. So have you noticed whenever they started that trio, the first 10 games or so, and I remember this vividly, where a lot of people were like, they're not doing as good as we thought, right? Because
Yeah,
you
they
have
were like
three.
9-8 or something. Yeah, they were
Yeah,
500
people
almost.
people were expecting them to be like to blow every single team out, but they were struggling, right? Because they were going through that synergy gap, that because there's a conflict of three alphas, I guess the best way to put it. Because Bosch, when he came from Toronto, he was a go-to guy. He was the man, right? Him with being an Aries cardinal energy, and now he's entering a team who has also two really strong cardinal energies, two Capricorns at that, in Dwayne Wade and LeBron James. So he's sort of like, wow, like I'm the man, but they also want to be me. So it's kind of someone had to sacrifice. And over time, with the help of Coach Spoelstra, who's a Scorpio, who connects very well with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, Bosch was sort of the one that sort of sacrificed. And you can tell he changed his game. He became a mid-range, spot-up, even three-point shooter. And it fit and ended up working out. And on top of that, their talent was already A plus as is. They were already good as the majority of the teams as is. So it was just that they need a little bit fixed on their synergy. So the synergy wasn't elite. It was more like a B plus, but the talent was elite, of course, So
Yeah, maybe if they had better synergy, they could have won those, what did he say, 5, 6, 7 titles instead of the
oh
two
yes.
that they won.
But this
Uh,
is interesting, real quick, and this is referring to your Warriors team. Remember when they had what the best was it 23? I'm 73 in 2016 was it? And they
yep.
played the Warriors. Remember I mean, they played the Cavaliers. Well, that Cavaliers 2016 Cavaliers team was extremely compatible. They had an A plus synergy. The only outlier in that whole roster seemed like that played majority of the minutes was Kyrie Irving. And look what happened. He ended up leaving, right? Because
Yeah.
he's a cardinal energy as well. So when you have two cardinal energies playing the same court and you have the same skill set that's primary, like an offensive skill set, there tends to be a little bit of conflict there, especially if they're opposite elements. So that's sort of what LeBron and Kyrie was facing. It's sort of like, I want to be the man, but LeBron James like, no, I'm the man. Sort of like that type of energy. Of course, they're not going to say anything. It's just that energy, right? And sure enough, Kyrie Irving ended up, I think going to Boston or something like that. So, but
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
team in particular was very compatible to LeBron James. Ty Lue, Taurus and Capricorn energy works very, very well. And he had all the right energies around him to fit him. So that was LeBron James's team, and they ended up beating the Golden State Warriors.
Some tough times for me. I want to talk about the most successful duo in at least, modern NBA history, who don't seem to get along off the court, which is interesting. And that's Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. So
Yeah,
what was it about them that allowed them to succeed on the court, but kind of fall apart off the court?
yeah, they're strong synergy. So Michael Jordan, he is an Aquarius sun with the Sagittarius moon, right? And Scottie Pippen is a double Libra. No, yeah, he's a double Libra. So Libra and Aquarius, both air elements, cardinal energy of what Scottie Pippen is, and then you have the grounded, constant energy of what Michael Jordan brings. So they have a naturally strong connection amongst each other, between each other, and then they kind of build around them, right? So, and usually the way I look at it, whenever there's off court stuff, I mean that's pretty much goes for anyone, and the way I see it is, that they had success as is. It's like in a relationship. You can have two very, very compatible people, but then they can end up in a divorce. But that doesn't mean that they weren't compatible to begin with. You know what I'm saying? Because that's how they actually got married. And if you look at it in that term. So with Jordan and Pippen, their synergy was elite. It was great, and that's how they became one of the best duos in the league. I mean, you look at others. Malone Stockton is another one. Curry Draymond's
Yeah.
another one. I mean, there's so many duos that are very very compatible. It's sort of like it blows your mind. Like wow, there is really something to this, So
Yeah. I also want to talk about some duos or trios that maybe succeeded initially, but didn't last long. And I wonder if there was some conflict there. So you mentioned KD and Golden State. So you said, I believe, Steph and Draymond are both Pisces, and I forget what KD was, but I think he was an air sign. So there was some conflict there. So do you think there was that had something to do with him eventually deciding, because it seemed like a perfect fit, but eventually deciding, you know what, I want to go on my basketball journey somewhere else?
could because he is a. Are you referring to Klay Thompson, right? Leaving
No, Kevin
or
Durant.
oh, Kevin Durant. Yeah, and there was also a slight conflict with him and Draymond, from what I remember. But I
Yeah.
think that could be it. His energy connects well with Steve Kerr, so that's one aspect to it. But then, I'm surprised he didn't end up staying, but that could be a factor. But their energies, Kevin Durant's energy is opposite from Draymond and Curry. It's an opposite energy. So their synergy wasn't the best, but the talent was elite. But yeah, leaving a team that could be a number of reasons why.
So I
So
wonder, some people point to Andre Iguodala being like the connective tissue
oh, you're
between
right.
those two guys. So where does his sign fit in
You're
with
right.
those three guys?
And guess who? I mean, that was like Coach Kerr's favorite player, right? Because
Yeah.
Iguodala is an Aquarius, right? Another air sign.
Hmm.
Back like Klay Thompson's an air sign, and Kevin Durant's an air sign. Back to where I was kind of trying to understand. Wow, they're picking up a whole bunch of air signs because they're all compatible with Steve Kerr. So Steve Kerr, that was sort of like his experience player to kind of like lean on to help the locker room, right? And that's what Iguodala provided, right? It helped them with Kevin Durant. It helped them connect. Yeah, you're right. It's sort of like that connecting pieces. So here's one, like I guess one tip. I don't really talk about this much, but whenever I analyze like a group, I always want to include, especially a trio, if there's a trifecta in there, the fixed, the mutable, or the cardinal. If one is missing, I feel like there's something missing with that connection. So it's interesting that you mentioned that there's Iguodala is sort of like that connecting piece between Durant and Curry. Why? Because okay, Draymond, right? Curry and Draymond are mutable energies, right? So you have the mutable energy there. Durant is that cardinal energy, right? So what's missing? The fixed energy, and that's what Iguodala provided. So he's sort of like that
Okay.
gap, that bridge that connects everyone, and that's helpful for a business. That's helpful for a team because you have if you have a team full of mutable signs, it's great. It can work, but you're missing something. You're missing that leadership. You're missing that stability. You see what I'm saying? So it kind of works all together in a sense. So especially if they're compatible elements too. So you know, so
Okay.
that's
There's two.
that's a great point that you brought up
Yeah.
with Iguodala.
All right. Yeah. Maybe we should work together a little more. Uh, there's two other like duos or trios that didn't, well, worked out, then didn't. But Kobe and Shaq, that was a big, big feud for a long time. Even though they won 3 titles together, I believe. So what were their energies, and how did they fit together?
They were compatible actually. So the thing with Kobe Bryant, he's a cusp of Leo Virgo, right? So he's sort of like a mix of both, you know, fire and earth, which makes lava, right? But that's a whole nother story. But he is technically a Virgo, which is compatible to a Pisces, right? So they are both mutable energies, and of course they had Phil Jackson, who's a Virgo as well. But they also had the right surrounding energies around them, and top tier talent as well. So they're them being dominant players. I mean, at that time they were both at their primes. It seemed like, and they, two of the best players in the league playing together in the position that was, the shooting guard and the center position that was dominant at their own right. So that's sort of what helped those two connect. But they were already compatible as is. It's just building around them, and then they had the right coach to do it as well.
Hmm. And then the last one here is the Nets trio, the famous one that unfortunately didn't get to play much together, but were potentially on the cusp of success, literally, a toe's length away from getting to the finals. And that's, of course, KD, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. So if they were healthy and there wasn't the COVID pandemic and Kyrie's vaccination status,
Oh,
how did they fit on the court? And, could they have been a dynasty had they stayed together?
the synergy wasn't the best. I give it more of a B plus. So you have the cardinal energies in both Kyrie and Durant, which are of compatible elements, right? But the thing is, they're both cardinal, so you're having two alphas trying to, be the lead guy, right? So it did kind of work in a way, but usually that type of duo is not the best, but it's more like a B plus, still good, right? But then you're adding an adaptable energy in a Virgo, which is what James Harden was. So James Harden was sort of like, okay, I can fit in the best I can to make everything work. And notice it did take them a while. Of course, they were having a lot of injuries until they finally all three started playing together, right? And they were clicking, right? And I can't remember if it was Durant that went down or something happened where it just started falling apart. And then I think, Harden requested a trade. It just kind of fell apart, but they were doing really good, to an extent. But then yet, I have a feeling it was something like something is missing from that group, right? And I feel like an energy sense that they were missing, either a fixed energy, but it was still working because the talent was there, obviously, but not good enough to want to completely stay, and I think there was tension, as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
with
It's
all that.
one of the great NBA what ifs in recent history, just because there was so much off the court stuff that impacted it. Like, Kyrie again not having the COVID vaccine didn't let him play, and that upset James Harden.
Mhm.
So I was just curious. And I think I could spend all day talking about all the different players and all that, but I
Mhm.
wanted to talk about the NBA in general, right? So we talked about Boston, we talked about um, the Knicks, you said the Grizzlies. Are there any other teams that maybe are being overlooked by the general NBA public, or maybe someone like OKC? What is it about them that makes them so special? So I guess it's kind of a two-part question: is
Yeah, yeah.
the teams at the top, what is it about them that's making them work so well together? And then maybe some teams that are under the radar that have that great synergy, then maybe are just waiting to get over the hump.
Cavaliers. That's one team that doesn't have, in my opinion, the best synergy, but they have an elite coaching staff. So, the what I mean by that is that their coaching staff is they're all compatible. I have to go back and check, but Kenny Atkinson being a Gemini with the Aries moon, and his coaching staff, he had, I believe, two Leos, a Libra, and two Geminis. They're all compatible, and that's rare for a coaching staff to have a lot of your assistants compatible. What does that mean? Well, of course, when you're game planning, you have everyone that's listening to your head coach, as far as the assistants go, they're all on the same page. They're all in agreement in a sense. Even if there's disagreement, they'll find ways to make it work. They absorb each other's energy very well, and then they implement it onto the court. But then they have, I would put the enough energies to make it work. Because Evan Mobley, he's a Gemini, very compatible to the coaching staff. You have Darius Garland, Okoro, you have Strus, you have Niang. They're all compatible. So really, the only outlier who plays a major role is Donovan Mitchell. But then he's a Virgo. See, the thing you understand with Virgos, Pisces, Geminis, and Sagittarius, those four I mentioned, they're all adaptable energies. They're mutable energies. So those are the energies that have the ability to adapt in certain scenarios. So had he been like maybe a cardinal energy, it might have been a little bit different, but it works out in this situation for them because you have your superstar player, but he has that adaptable type of energy that he can fit into a scenario. So OKC, they actually already have a good synergy as a team. They're just kind of under the radar, um, SGA, Cancer energy with the coach. Dagnall, he's a Pisces, so Cancer Pisces energy, similar to what Boston has, is very strong. Not only that, they have Holmgren and Hartenstein. They're both Taurus energy. Notice how when Holmgren went out, being a Taurus, guess who stepped in? Another Taurus. I mean, so their synergy never fell off, right? So that's part of the reason why they're still good as is, because SGA has a center that he can count on, who from a position that that got a player that got injured, player filled in just same exact energy as him. So, and they have Caruso being a Pisces as well, compatible to that group, and then the Wallace and Wiggins, Capricorn Cancer, also compatible to that group, and Isaiah Joe, also a Cancer, compatible to that group. So the outlier really is Jay Williams, who's a fire energy. He's really the outlier, but it still works because you have a larger a larger amount of players that fit amongst each other. And it's okay to have one or two in a sense because it still fits in, right? So that's part of the reason why they're a very, very strong team as
Hmm.
well. But another team I looked at, but of course they're probably just tanking for now on purpose. It's the Nets, Brooklyn Nets. I mean, they have a good synergy. They actually do. I mean, especially after the trade. But their talent is not up there. Their experience is not up there. They're sort of just kind of like, in my opinion, I feel like they're kind of just giving up to kind of just see what pick they would get. But they do have a good synergy low key. So that's another team. Well, only for this year, but I have a feeling that they have different plans ahead of them. So they're kind of already kind of going for that.
Yeah, they're trying to get in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Uh, Again, I could spend all day, and I definitely want to do another pod with you, of course, on some of the other sports. I wanted to keep it NBA just to keep it
Hmm.
under an hour, because again, we could talk forever about football, which is my favorite sport, and some
Yeah.
of the big players there. But I guess I do want to ask about a couple superstar players and their signs and how they fit with a couple other players. So I think we already talked about Giannis, talked
Okay.
about Luka a little bit. What about some of the more up and coming guys? So somebody like Anthony Edwards and John Morant.
Oh, both Leo. Interesting. Interesting you mentioned that. So, and another one, you might as well put him in the group. LaMelo Ball, also a Leo.
Yeah, throw him in there
So,
too.
so
Sure.
yeah, the three Leos, right? So, okay. The thing with Minnesota is an interesting situation. So, whenever that trade happened to bring in Randall, right? Randall being a Sagittarius connects very well with the Leo, right? So, the way I saw that more as benefiting Anthony Edwards, right? But it takes a notch down in synergy for Coach Finch. So Finch, being a Scorpio, connected very well with Karl Anthony Towns, along with with Gobert, Reed, and at that time it was Kenny Anderson not any Anderson, I can't slow mo, and then
Yeah, Kyle
Nikel,
Anderson.
yeah. So he had a good. The coach really had a good hold of his team structure because he had enough energies with the right influences within their role to build that the strong team last year. So with Randall coming into the picture, it's sort of like if you're a head coach, it's like, oh man, I'm losing my best player. I mean, Ty Anderson, no, I mean, Towns is out the door now, but I'm bringing an energy that's not compatible to me. So I'm gonna have some challenges trying to coach him in a sense. That's a way to look at it. And then another key player no one talks about, Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson being a Virgo, they had three Virgos on that team: Alexander Walker, and then Kyle Anderson and also Reed. They're all Virgos. So think of Virgos, they're great energies to help because again they're back to the adaptable type of energy, and that fits well for Scorpio energy, who likes that control, that stability, right? And Virgo fits that energy very well. But if you're losing two of those energies and adding an energy where you're going to have a tough time coaching, I mean that makes it a little bit of a challenge. But it's good for Anthony Edwards, but it's just now they threw off an imbalance in their synergy. Now it's either you have to change the coaching to fit the rest of the squad, especially with Randall and Edwards, or just keep being a mediocre team, and that's kind of where a lot of teams fall under with. I think Indiana's in that same mold. Atlanta has been the same. I've been saying it for years. Uh, Indiana has always, it's still stuck in that mold. It's like they have to either, it's a double-edged sword. It's either make a change in your star player or the head coach. It's one of the two. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of teams that fall in that mediocre range where they kind of figure out why can't we break out? New York did it last year. He did a wonderful job from breaking out of that mediocre. But there's
Hmm.
a whole bunch of teams that are still stuck in that mediocre, which is sort of like the norm with a lot of these NBA teams right now.
Or what about last question? Victor Wembanyama. What is his sign?
Oh,
And I mean, people are talking about him as the next GOAT, but I'm curious about what some of his traits are.
so he's a Capricorn with the Gemini moon. But guess who else was a Capricorn? Another GOAT in LeBron James, right? So you
Mm.
one LeBron, a Capricorn leaving the NBA soon, maybe a couple years or maybe after, I don't know, who knows. But then you have another Capricorn entering and sort of like taking the face of the NBA now. So yeah, he's the same energy as LeBron James. So the thing with Capricorn and Gemini moons, they're sort of like again that authoritative type of energy. So he's gonna mean results. He's very serious. Capricorns are very mature energies, right? Because they're the ones that sort of live life backwards. So they want to succeed first, they want results first, and they want everything to be, everything number one or top. because if they don't, that's when they get on their ugly side, right? Because they're such a
Hmm.
serious sign, right? They get a little bit pessimistic in a sense. So him having that Gemini moon, he's a little bit different in the sense that he's a little bit more talkative, a little bit more open to what his thinking is in the mind. So, and you kind of already seen that when beyond, he sort of says things that's on his mind that's kind of like people are like, you shouldn't have said that, or type of thing, right? But that's his energy type. But right now, he actually does have a good synergy team for him. The head coach is the one that doesn't fit that roster. Mitch Johnson being a Sagittarius, he's filled with a team full of energy of earth and water signs. So that team is good, but I feel like what's lacking is just experience. Even though they do have the Harrison Barnes and then Chris Paul, but I feel like they're already at the tail end of their. I think just give it about 2 or 3 more years for that team, and I think they're going to be a good team if they stick because Hassel fits well with Wembanyama.
Hmm.
Vassell fits well with Wembanyama. Sohan fits well. So they have the right group. Just all they need to do, stick to that group. And I've seen teams in the past where they give up on a group too easily and it falters the power and it sets them back even more years, right? And they're already there. They're already like a 500 team. They're doing good. So if they can keep that, just maintain it until the next year or maybe a year after that, and they're going to be good. Denver was like that, when they had
Yeah.
Jokic and Murray. And and I remember when I analyzed Denver Nuggets at that time, no one even considered them to be elite. But when I saw their team, I was like, wow, this team stands out. They're a strong team. But it took them 2 3 years to really, they eventually won the championship, right? But that's what I mean. Just stick to what's good, and just give them a little bit more experience, and then just add on pieces that you feel that fits, skill, talent, etc. Everything else.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, as he continues to grow and develop, I mean, he's already
Oh,
possibly a top 10 player in
he's
the league. So,
he's gonna be scary.
yeah.
Oh my God. I feel like if he can get a coach, like someone like Ty Lue, Taurus energy would work. I mean, Eric Spoelstra, like that type of energy. Even Finch, Coach Finch, or even Mike Brown. Mike Brown would be another energy that like those are energy
Former
types
Spurs
that.
assistant. So, yeah.
Oh, you're right. You're
Yeah.
right. See, those are all energies that will connect very well with. See, in my opinion, the way I see it, I mean, you would want a strong relation with the coach to your best players, and I think that
Hmm.
that's a big advantage because you want to make your best player happy, and whatever is going through his mind, whether he sees it in end game, he can, you want him to easily express it to the coach without having any of that conflicting energy, kind of okay, I don't know if I should tell him because I don't know how he's going to react, that sort of stuff, and rather than be a little bit more open and freely to communicate. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that because you did mention when you were talking about the Warriors
Mhm.
that Steve Kerr and Steph Curry are conflicting signs, which
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought so, but now that you mention it, I'm like, they are kind of always in conflict where Steph is having to rein himself in a little bit for Steve Kerr. Kerr
Mhm.
is not the most he's not the most complimentary of Steph in public, which I always thought was kind of weird.
Uh-huh.
So it's funny that you mentioned that because I would not have thought so, but now that you
Oh
call it out, I'm
man.
like, you know what? It all makes sense.
I've seen it over the years. Remember when Doc Rivers, right? Philadelphia 76ers. He made a comment about Ben Simmons, right? You remember that?
Hmm.
They are conflicting
Yes.
energies like no other. But that's what I mean by that. Players are human beings. We're all human beings. They take things to heart, and sometimes when an energy is opposite of them, they don't know how to communicate. They just read it differently. That's all it is. So a Cancer energy, which with Ben Simmons, that they're very sensitive. They're very you have to approach them a little bit different. But a Cardinal energy, they'll say things straight up that will they're a little bit more straightforward in the sense of Cardinal energy. So when he said that, I knew right away, like, he shouldn't have said that. Kind of like thing. Especially he's not the right sign to say that. If he was a Leo or another energy, a Gemini, they'll absorb it a little bit better. That's what I'm trying to say. And then you
Hmm.
see it
Okay.
in a situation in Phoenix Suns where can't remember the Monty Williams and DeAndre Ayton. So another
Yeah.
Libra Cancer scenario that also occurred there. And then was a player Brown from who ran off the field. I can't
Oh,
remember it.
Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown. He's a Cancer, and then his coach was opposite of him as well. Being so. You see this a lot. It's like certain energies, you have to understand them first. I think it's a great thing to understand the energy first. And I think understanding the zodiac energies will be very, very helpful. And then that goes a long way.
Yeah. I'm a believer. I've been as soon as the Warriors traded for Dennis Schroeder, I went to your page. I'm like, what does this guy think of the move? I think you gave it a B,
You,
which is
you,
I think it's been okay since.
you know what the Warriors are missing. I don't know if I tweeted this out yet, but I don't, what they're really missing. They're a mutable dominant team, which is good. The thing about mutable dominant teams is that they could be really really good or really really bad, but there's inconsistency. They're not consistent
Mhm.
enough. So I feel like they need a player that can fit that mold to kind of stabilize them. Lakers recently did it with Finney Smith, him being a Taurus energy. I felt like Lakers need someone like that. They didn't have anyone, and there's always when you're missing one over the trifecta, something is missing. You just get a sense, but a lot of people don't even know. But Finney Smith is going to help stabilize that Lakers team in a sense, right? So with the Warriors, they're missing that cardinal energy. They can add a little bit of cardinal energy and also a fixed energy. Yes, Kuminga fits that cardinal mold, but he is of opposite elements of majority of that group because they have a lot of Pisces for some reason. Like the starting five, I think at one time I was like, man, they're all Pisces. It's strange, but they're all compatible. But you just have to find the right blend, the right mix to help stabilize that mutable energy. Because mutable energy, they're flexible, they're adaptable. Yeah, all that is good, especially within games and even seasons. You can adapt scenarios, but you need a little bit of stability too, and then also a little bit of leadership, a leader type of energy. So,
For sure.
Cancer energy could work. Some, believe it or not, someone like Tobias Harris. I know he's kind of on the downfall, but Tobias Harris would fit that mold. Cam Whitmore from Houston, he's a perfect fit for someone like Golden State. And then even Jabari Smith Jr. as a Taurus could fit a team like the Warriors. So yeah,
Yeah,
so that
they
I feel like
definitely need
that's
to
what's
do
missing
something.
from them. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your wealth of knowledge. You're an encyclopedia when it comes to this stuff. So, where can people find out more about your approach to basketball, and then where can they follow you on social media?
On Twitter X, follow me into Zodiac GM or even a Hoopstrology. So yeah, so on Twitter X, just follow, give us a follow.
Cool. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Cool. Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.